Are you tired of doing all of this work, but seeing almost none of the results? What if the missing ingredient in your manifestation is actually rest? My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD, and ordained minister of Metaphysical Sciences. I am also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious, both available on Amazon and Audible. When it comes to manifestation, when you are on this journey, and I'm sure you can agree with me, the journey is hard. The journey is tough, meaning that you're doing all the things. You're busy. You're productive. You're active. You are engaged. You are stimulated. You are trying all the techniques. You're reading all the books. You're intentional about what it is you are going to materialize and manifest. You are intentional about your spiritual awakening and you being an enlightened being and having that full-on experience. But here's the thing. Along that journey, many people fail to recognize one of the most important aspects of manifestation is actually rest. You see, rest isn't about laziness. It's actually about power. It's actually about recognizing your power. It's actually about taking time to really understand that the works that you have put in, the effort, the energy, the intention, the frequency, the vibration is actually in play. It is materializing. It is actually working itself. The thing that we have to recognize as well is that you're dealing with a contrast of two what appears to be opposing natures. The ability to instantly imagine and think of something, feel it, own it within yourself, within your spirit, right? By way of imagination, visualization. The spiritual realm is instant. Whereas on the other hand, the physical realm is a bit delayed, right? It acknowledges a rule called time. And so when you think about what it is that you desire, when you put that intention out there into the universe, into the ether, it unfortunately takes a little bit of time for this physical reality to take shape and form. That is when it is time for you to rest. That is what that rest represents. Okay? So you've been taught that rest means that you're not doing enough. Sometimes it's hard for people who are very engaged and intentional about their life to actually rest. I myself can be at a space where I need to be constantly moving, constantly doing, or at least thinking in order for me to feel like I'm in alignment, right? But rest isn't passive, right? It's actually a magnetic experience. It is a magnetic expression of manifestation. It is the surrender and the allowance of the works, the things that you have put out into the universe to actually reciprocate, to ripple back to you. And so you have to recognize that when you rest deeply, you align more fully with the energy of receiving. You know, resting is almost like the prerequisite of receiving. Because when you're not resting and you're constantly in action and you're constantly doing, when do you have the moment? When do you take the time to be mindful in order to recognize the reciprocation of the universe? To recognize and see that all the things that you are or had done and have put out there are actually coming back to you. When do you have time to take notice of that? That is when you are at rest. Rest means you are allowing yourself to receive. Rest means that you are being mindful about the process of receiving, about the process of materializing, manifestation, you see? So when we think about your rest, think about it in terms of the easiest way we think about rest and we can make sense of it is when it comes to working out, right? There was a time where I was highly involved with working out consistently, like numerous times a day. Very active in CrossFit. I was even a CrossFit coach, and I would work out 2, sometimes 3 times a day. But here's the thing. When you're really involved in building up a muscle, and this is obviously metaphorical, but when you are building up a muscle, you have to allow time for that muscle to recover, to recuperate, to regenerate. And when you allow it to regenerate, guess what? It builds back up even stronger and bigger than what it was before. The same thing applies to manifestation. The same thing applies to you working your manifestation muscles, so to speak. And so even when you get down to science, it backs this up, right? Rest recharges your nervous system, right? It opens access to your subconscious. And that's where the true creative power is, in your subconscious. Why do you think we spend a third of our lives in the subconscious mind? By way of sleep. When you sleep, you are in your subconscious mind. Try not sleeping for 4 or 5 days straight and understand that you won't be able to manifest or do anything productive. So you have to recognize how important rest is. Okay? It is important for your body. It is important for your mind. And it is definitely important for your spirit. This is why we practice things like mindfulness, meditation, stillness. So you have to shift your perspective from a hustle mentality to healing, And, the biggest part about that is releasing the guilt of not doing, releasing the guilt of feeling like you're slacking off, feeling like you're procrastinating, feeling like you're not living up to your highest potential. We assume that this best version of ourselves that we are looking to experience is one that is constantly moving, constantly in action, constantly doing. But in fact, your future version, the version of yourself whom you truly are, is one that has a perfect balance between action and inaction. A perfect balance between doing and being. And so when you recognize that this future version of yourself, the version of yourself you are in the trajectory of becoming, you have a good balance of knowing when to act and knowing when to be still. So rest isn't about avoiding work. You see, it's the work. When it's aligned, the work actually manifests itself either if you are engaged in it, and especially when you are allowing it, when you are surrendering to the frequency, the vibration, the energy, when you allow for whatever you sent out to actually come back. Stillness helps you hear your intuition, right? So when you are still, you can allow yourself to really understand the timing of when it's time to act and when it's time to be still. When it's time to take action, be proactive, and when it's time to rest. But you must understand that within the universe, it consists of a balance of 2 things usually, right? There's always a contrast happening. Yes, they are both the essence of one thing, but there are 2 sides of the spectrum. And so when we identify and understand these 2 things, we're talking about ultimately manifestation. When we talk about action and then rest, we're talking about manifestation. Action alone is not manifestation, because if you are just in action constantly, maybe you can argue that what you're going to manifest is burnout, right? Maybe even death. We have to rest. It's very important. Now, yes, you can be in action most of the time, a lot of the time, but you must also acknowledge the importance of rest. So when you are practicing stillness, it allows you to actually take time to be receptive, take time to be reflective of how you were acting, like what you were in action of, what you were doing. It allows you to really take a serious inventory as to what you did and what you can do better, the results of what you did, and how you can fine tune or polish those actions to do better. But you only achieve that when you have moments of stillness. It's almost impossible to be still while you're in action. You see, the only times I've experienced a level of stillness while I'm in action is when I'm running, and running for a long distance. Now, the thing is, there is parts of you that may be in action and parts of you that are still. So sometimes when I'm running long distances, my body knows what it's doing. Muscle memory, that is part of also the subconscious functioning, right? And so when you are constantly doing something repetitively, it just becomes muscle memory. You can do it without thinking. You can do it without, putting effort into it. Initially, it takes effort, but eventually you get to a point of, okay, oh, wow, I just ran 2 miles. I didn't even notice. And that's because the body is just taking over. The subconscious mind has taken over. And then you have your conscious mind, which is the part of you that's really just chilling and just kind of taking it easy. You're relaxed. You're able to just receive information. You're able to think things through. And so a lot of times when I'm running is when I have the most profound insight. Why? Because my mind is at rest, though I am doing something. So there are times when that can happen, but most times we need to put ourselves intentionally in a state of rest, meditation, right? Just simply being still, some grounding. But ultimately, when you do that, it balances you out completely in the proper ratio, right? Because you're going to be in action more. This is why we sleep less than we are awake. Okay. Because the rest isn't more necessary than the actions, right? Than the doing, than the being. But you must acknowledge that it's important. So rest becomes more of like a spiritual strategy when it comes to you finding, right, your enlightenment. You're experiencing that self-revelation or self-realization. Okay. It's not about just the physical recovery. That's very important though. But that's only simply a good example of how you can use rest and implement it into your spirituality. Spirituality is not about just simply reading all the books. It's not about going to as many yoga sessions as possible. It's not about joining as many communities and having conversations with people. It's also about being alone, spending time with yourself, being silent, resting, meditating, sleeping, which is one of my favorite things to do. Okay. So rest fuels manifestation. Okay. And here's how it does that. When your body is calm, your visions become clearer. And it's very important that you have clear vision, as clear as you can possibly have it. Sometimes you don't have a clear vision. You just have an intuitive draw or desire or yearning. And that's so powerful that it pulls you right along your path. And then eventually you begin to awaken to more clarity, you see. But rest also supports vivid visualization, right? Which also strengthens your vibrational match with your desires. If you are restless, if you are all over the place, if you're not focused and you're spread thin, what is that doing to your vibrational frequency? That means that your vibration is all over the place. Whatever it is that you're experiencing emotionally, mentally, if you're always up and down all over the place, that's your vibrational frequency. Chances are, if you're all over the place like that, then the things that you desire are going to be all over the place as well. One minute you may manifest or attract something to you. The next minute that'll go away and then something else will come to you because you're bouncing all over the place. So you have to make sure that when you rest, yes, it is physical, but it is more of a spiritual practice of resting your mind, resting your consciousness. It's really about allowing. It's about surrendering. When you do that and just be, then you allow for yourself to see things clearer. Be more intentional about your desires. Be more intentional about the things you wish to experience, your desires, right? Those things you want to materialize, those things you want to have, those things you want to create. The thing you wish to be. Understanding your true self. That happens with stillness. That happens with looking at old patterns, looking at maybe something that happened a moment ago and asking yourself, could you have done something different or better that aligns with what it is that you desire? You see, that comes with rest. So it gives you a space to actually be the observer of your life rather than being so in that you're identified and you are distracted, unaware that you are not your life. Your life is just simply an expression. Your life is just simply an experience. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your body. They are just expressions of consciousness, of your awareness. And so when you are right in the trenches of what it is that you're experiencing and you identify with it, then it's hard for you to gain clarity and a good understanding as to the space between who you truly are versus what it is that you're experiencing. When you recognize that space, then it allows for you to have some divine downloads. Divine downloads is another way of saying channeling. When you are so still, you are at rest, you are calm, that allows for whatever insight, wisdom, right, that is within you or that is without you, outside of you, to be received, to be interpreted, right, to be experienced. Rest provides that for you, right? That is where creative ideas come from. That is where solutions come from. When you are at a space where you're able to connect your spirituality with your mind, right? Especially your subconscious mind. What happens is you get to a point of developing a skill where you can go to sleep with a question, right? For most of us, it may be a problem. It may be a challenge, but we're just worded as a question, right? How do I get through this thing? How do I resolve this? How do I deal with this? How do I ascend above this? You ask that question every night before you go to sleep. The rest allows your subconscious to receive these downloads from the universe because the universe has all the answers. And remember, you and the universe are one. So look at the universe as another layer of the mind, right? Conscious mind, subconscious mind, etc. And so, but you're going to allow yourself to rest in your conscious mind, the part of your mind that's constantly going, looking, observing, analyzing, critiquing, coming up with conclusions, right? That part of the mind is like the monkey mind. It's constantly going. When you sleep, you put that part of the mind to sleep. But before you go to sleep, you send a message to the subconscious. So that way the subconscious mind can then receive the insight, the wisdom, the download with the solution, with a creative idea, okay, with a better understanding. And then when you wake up, that is when you are able to access it, receive it, bring it to your conscious awareness, and then you can take it and run, you see? But you must understand manifestation, it takes faith. And faith often shows up, it often shows up the strongest when you're not forcing things, when you're just at a space of understanding, recognition, remembrance, remembering who you are, you know? So faith isn't just kind of like this blind faith where you have no idea. Faith is really an understanding, a recognition of the idea that, you know what? You are a divine, infinite being that essentially creates everything that you're experiencing and that you got this, right? It's just that simple. So when it comes to understanding how to implement rest, you want to practice some, rest rituals, right? And it'll help you manifest more. It'll help you manifest, I would say, more consciously, meaning that, remember, we're always manifesting. Everything that you do and don't do will manifest something. But we want to do it intentionally. We want to do it consciously. So some rest rituals that you can do to help you manifest more consciously. I mentioned meditation. Very important. There's a reason why meditation is mentioned in all, and I mean all, of the spiritual philosophies, belief systems, even in religion. Sometimes they call it prayer, but ultimately it's meditation. Okay. But use this as a time to relax deeply and just plant those powerful intentions, but still be still, like sometimes when we think about intentions, we're like tight about it. We're like, oh, this is my intention. This is what I want. You have to let go and you have to allow. It's not about desperately grasping for what you want. It's about truly acknowledging who you are. And when you acknowledge who you are, what you desire is just a byproduct. You see, nature walks is one of my favorite things to do. Walks is one of my favorite things to do. But in nature, man, when you have no distractions, you don't see any buildings, you're not around the city or, a lot of traffic and cars. And maybe you walk across by another person, maybe some animals. That's the time also to rest your mind, to let your body just move while your mind just opens up to divine insight. Because, being around nature, it's completely divine, right? It's unadulterated, it's uninterrupted. It's just pure divine energy. And so when you're in that environment and you're walking, the walking can kind of distract your conscious mind. It puts you in a hypnotic state sometimes if you do it intentionally, if you do it more like a meditative walking where you're just focusing on each step and how each step transfers throughout your body. How does your body feel with each step? You're not walking with the intent of trying to get to a certain place at a certain time. You're just being really present. That is a powerful, very, very powerful ritual that's going to help you, right? That's going to help you recognize the importance of rest and will actually help you to manifest quite much easier than you ever imagined. Now, creative rest. Creative rest looks like journaling, sketching, drawing, writing letters to your future self, which is something that I've been doing and I absolutely love because I'm able to have a relationship and a connection deeper than I ever would have thought with the person that I know I am to become. Which what? It just anchors in. It solidifies it. It locks it in. You see? So doing that is very important. This thing activates your subconscious. So whenever you're writing, drawing, sometimes I draw the flower of life, which is a series of circles. Sometimes I just draw that. I just trace it and follow it and just allow. And it really expand your consciousness and allow you to just receive things. And if nothing else, actually calm what it is that you're already been receiving that's been pulling you away from your purpose. Another thing you can do is a sacred pause where you just turn off your phone, you turn off your notifications, you just sit in silence. It's not even about meditation. It's just being silent. It's just being still. And you just let the universe just catch up to your energy. You just rock and you just rock with it. You just completely chill, right? That's another thing that you can do that takes no effort at all. So these are all rituals that's going to help you to really tap into this power and your ability to rest and use rest as a powerful tool for manifestation. Rest, you got to look at rest as almost like a manifestation catalyst. You see, rest isn't a break from your manifestation. That's the thing we get twisted. We think rest is a break from the thing that we desire, the thing that we've been working hard to achieve. But that's not what it is. Rest is actually how you embody receiving that thing that you've been working toward. And when you understand that, then you start to see how you can absolutely make rest a sacred act, not just something you do, right? When you just quote unquote feel lazy. You can just intentionally say, you know what? It is time for me to rest. There are many times where I take a nap. I take a nap in the middle of the day and I say, all right, it's time for me to rest. And when I wake up from my rest, I am recharged and I am into a new mode. If I'm doing two major things that really don't align with one another, I'll say, okay, I'm going to do this in the morning. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to rest, take a nap. And then once I get up from my nap, then I'm going to be reset and I'm going to actually pursue and take action on the other thing and do the other thing, right? So use rest as a way to set clear intentions. Use rest to allow the universe to essentially rearrange things in your favor, right? Remember, rest is about just allowing, when we say rest, we're resting the conscious mind because you can't just shut down everything, right? The body's always going, consciousness is always going, your subconscious is always going. So you really want to acknowledge that rest isn't the complete shutdown of everything, right? Rest is just an intentional existence of allowing, receiving, surrendering. Okay. When you're in action and you're doing, you're going, you're giving essentially. When you're resting, you're receiving, you're allowing, you're trusting. And so rest is about trusting the process, trusting, knowing that what you did will create results, has created results. You just simply have to wait for it because in this physical realm, time is a thing, right? The law of attraction doesn't respond to overwork, right? The universe doesn't respond to burnout. Okay. So it's unnecessary to think that way and be that way. It responds to your vibration. And so in order for you to keep your vibration high and at a place where it aligns with what you desire, you have to be willing to balance, okay? Action and inaction, doing, resting, okay? So be mindful about that. Your vibration is highest when you're aligned, not when you're exhausted. So do not burn yourself out. Make sure you incorporate rest in the process of your creation, of your unfoldment, of your spiritual awakening in your journey. Okay. You must understand that you don't manifest more by doing more. And trust me, that's something that I had to understand myself, because I'm one I like to do a lot. I like to really go in and I like to just grind it out. And I enjoy doing that though. And so it really doesn't take away from me, but like I said, I always make sure I am mindful about my resting. I'm always making sure, because to me, I understand the value of rest, and I would rather sleep than eat, because rest to me is way more important than food, right? So you have to recognize that whatever form of rest that is actually contributing to your process of manifestation, identify that, and most certainly make it a part of your rituals. Make it a part of your process of creation. We're all different to various degrees, but ultimately understand that rest is rest. Rest is necessary for all of us. Even if you look at nature, you look at the cosmos, the universe, there is rest everywhere around there. Even if you look at the Bible, on the seventh day, God rested. Now, that is another conversation, because when I talk about God, I'm talking about the conscious mind, right? Or consciousness. So what I want you to do is I want you to really think about how you can manifest more by becoming the version of who you already are, right? By becoming the version of who already has what it is that you desire. That's what I want you to focus on and think about. And then think about the fact that that version of yourself, right? They rest, and they do so on purpose, because they understand the importance of it. They understand how necessary rest is. So I invite you to figure out a ritual, a plan, a strategy to incorporate some form of rest into your daily life outside of sleep. Something else, whether it be sitting in your car for 5 minutes and just being still without your phone, without any radio playing or nothing, whether it be taking a walk next to, at the local park or trail, whether it be going to the bathroom and just sitting there for a little bit, whatever it takes, find your space, find your moment to rest. Okay. Rest is key. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and get access to this free ebook, The Power Within. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.